לשמוע לקול שלך. בשם ישוע אדוננו, בשמו אנחנו מתפללים. Amen. Speaking to my Orthodox Jewish friends, and I do have Orthodox Jewish friends, and I even have friends from Orthodox Jewish families who believe as I do. In fact, I even have one or two friends who are ultra-Orthodox Jewish rabbis who've come to believe what you're going to hear. These are not secular Jews. These are not people with no Jewish background. They're not mongrel Jews. They are actual frums, even Haridim, even Rabbanim, who've come to believe what I'm going to tell you. The question is, there's a joke that goys tell about Jewish people. If you have two Jews, you have three opinions. That's the joke. This goes back to legal argumentation in halakha, Jewish legalism. And that derives from something known as pilpul. It could mean this, it could possibly mean that, it might mean another thing. This is pilpul. Well, Christians understand in a way what pilpul is because Jesus addressed it. At the end of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus did not speak the way the rest of the rabbis did. He, of course, would have been known as Rabbi Yeshua Bar Yosef ben Etzeret, and it says he spoke as authority. He did not engage in pilpul. The only time he engaged in pilpul is when he got the Sadducees and Pharisees arguing with each other. You have two, you have three opinions. The question is, which rabbi do you want to believe? It's a matter of choice. Now, you can always find another opinion. You can always find in the rabbinic literature, in the Talmudic literature, another opinion, another reason not to believe it. But what I'm going to propose now is this. When you look at Jews who believe in Jesus, and the way that they handle the Hebrew Scriptures and say it's about him as the Messiah, the standard response is generally, these are Gentile distortions. These are Christian misapplications or misinterpretations of the Hebrew Scriptures. If you knew the Hebrew Scriptures, if you understood Judaism, you wouldn't believe such spielkus, such narishkeit. That is the standard response. The question is, which rabbi will you believe? Our Orthodox Jewish friends refer to Moses as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our rabbi. Please find me one place in the Torah where Moses is called a rabbi. Please find me one place in the Tanakh where Moses is called a rabbi. Please find me anywhere where there's a rabbi. In fact, please find me anywhere where there's a Bet Knesset, where there's a synagogue. It's not in there. What is in there? Well, let's begin with this first rabbi, as he's called, Moshe Rabbeinu. Look with me to the book of Yehoshua, Joshua chapter 8, please. Verse 35. There was not a word of all that Moses had commanded, which Joshua did not read before all the assembly of Israel, with the women of Israel and the little ones and the strangers who were living among them. Hakol hadvarim, hakol hamilim, ukore. Everything that Moses commanded was written down because Joshua read it in front of the whole nation. How then can you subscribe to the belief of the Torah Be'al Peh, that the teachings of the Talmud and of the Mishnah and later rabbinic writings like the Tanaim, the Amorim, that these things were given to Moses on Mount Sinai and simply not written down until later? No. The Hebrew Scripture said there was not a word of all that Moses had commanded that Joshua did not read. You cannot read something that has not been written. So the first question I would propose to my Orthodox friends and rabbis is this. Who is greater? Rabbi Berkowitz, Rabbi Goldstein, Rabbi Ben Hamo, or Moshe Rabbeinu? You either believe Moses or you believe the rabbis in Temple Fortune, Golders Green, Stamford Hill, Brooklyn, etc. But you can't believe both, and I'm not joking. It was all written down. Which rabbis you want to believe? I generally break the rabbis down into three categories. There are the ancient sages who wrote the early midrashim and things of that nature. The ancient sages. Then there are the academic rabbis, serious academic scholars. Some of the finest scholars in the world are academic rabbis who are alive or who have been alive in the last 20 years. I speak of Professor David Flusser, Hebrew University, Professor Dr. Pinchas Lapid, Professor of Hebrew, Bar Ilan University in Israel, who says from a Jewish perspective the resurrection of Jesus is a historical fact. It is undeniable. Orthodox rabbi, professor. I speak of Rabbi Jacob Neusner, Dr. Jacob Neusner, Professor Emeritus, Brown University, Ivy League Professor of Judaism in the United States. He says that the Gospels are the pivotal Second Temple period Jewish literature between the early Midrashim and the Apocryphal. You understand? These are Orthodox rabbis who are academics. They're scholars. Recently, a few weeks ago, Gezer Vermesh from the Dead Sea Scrolls Commission, Oxford University, died. Why is it that he never mocked the Jewishness of Jesus or denounced it as a Gentile fabrication? Or why is it I can't find any really academic rabbis who will do that? I find pseudo-academic rabbis who would like to do it, including Tuvia Singer. But why can't I find someone like Rabbi Larry Fishman from the Dead Sea Scrolls Commission, who I met in Australia? So we have the rabbis who are academics, and we have the ancient sages. Not to offend anybody, but compared to the ancient sages and compared to the academics, we have the third category. If I was going to be really blunt about it, I might use the Yiddishism and refer to them as the Schlockhaus rabbis. They're not academics, and they're not the sages. They are the ones who denounced the Jewishness of the New Testament, even though every one of its writers was a Jew. One exception, an ethnic Gentile who converted to Judaism. All the rest were Jewish. And the things they come out with. I read what they say. I can look on the internet and see what they say. The question is it them against Christians? Is it them against Jewish believers? Or is it them against their own sages? Is it them against Jewish academic rabbis? Don't get me wrong. There are two reasons Jewish people, of course, oppose the messiahship of Jesus. The first is the ugly history of anti-Semitism perpetrated against the Jews in his name. This is clear, but as I always point out, don't expect me to blame Moses for the fact that an Orthodox Jew with a yarmulke on his head put 2 bullets into the back of Yitzhak Rabin in the name of Moses and the Torah. Moses never taught murder. Either did Rabbi Yeshua Bar Yosef. Don't expect me to blame him for what false Christians did in his name. I've got to deal with Moses based on what Moses said and did and wrote, and I have to deal with Yeshua based on who he was and what he taught. As it says 3 times in the book of Mishlei, an unjust balance is an abomination to Hashem. You've got to be equitable. Same standards apply to everybody. Yes, so-called Christendom, not to be confused with Christianity. Christianity was simply Jews who believed the Torah was fulfilled by the Messiah and took that message of salvation to the Gentile nations. That's Christianity. Christendom came centuries later. Christendom is the World Council of Churches. Christendom was begun by the Church Fathers. It's patristic. Christendom is the Vatican. Christendom is the ugly history of anti-Semitism perpetrated against the Jews in the name of Christ. Do not confuse Rabbinic Judaism with Torah, and do not confuse Christendom with Christianity. They're 2 different things. And so we begin. What's the second reason Jews object? If he was the Messiah, why didn't he bring in worldwide peace? Is that what the Hebrew Scriptures teach? We'll come to that in a moment. But that's the question. Is there argument with Jews who believe? Is there argument with Christian interpretations of the Hebrew Scriptures, which Christians say are about Yeshua, Jesus? Or is there argument against their own sages? Well, let's begin. Let's really begin. Why did he not bring in worldwide peace? Why is there still anti-Semitism, famines, earthquakes, pestilence, natural disasters? Why the mess in the Middle East? Why have the Jewish people scavenged the nations for centuries, being persecuted one nation after another, and when they finally go home, people don't want them to be there either? How could he have been the Messiah? And then so many were killed in his name. How could he be the Messiah? What nonsense, what Spielkuss again, what Narishkeit. That is the popular argument. It gets emotionally charged to you telling me that my Jewish grandfather, who perished in an oven in a concentration camp, went to hell because he rejected your Jesus, in whose name he was murdered? My grandfather was a righteous man. He died saying the Shema, when you Christians put him in the oven. That's a loaded argument. Am I saying that your grandfather is eternally lost because he rejected my Jesus? No, I'm saying somebody's Gentile grandfather, somebody's Jewish grandfather is eternally lost because he rejected your Jesus. There's only one question. Im hu ken uhu lo meshichenu, rak she'ela achat. What people said about him, did in his name, that's not the issue. What did he do? Did he come to bring in worldwide peace? We know we have two pictures of the Messiah in Judaism, HaMashiach ben Yosef and HaMashiach ben David, son of Joseph, son of David. But let me read, please, from the Hebrew prophet Daniel, chapter 9. Verse 24, 77s have been decreed for your people and your holy city, Daniel, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. The Messiah is going to usher in righteousness. The Messiah, even the rabbis themselves agree, will anoint the most holy place and finish transgression. And we read, you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree, there were three, but the main one was 685 BC, as predicted by Isaiah, BCE. That from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, Mashiach Hanasi, Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It'll be built again with moat, even in times of distress. Then after 62 sevens, the Mashiach will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and sanctuary. Its end will come with a flood. Even to the end, there will be desolations determined. HaMashiach hitzterek lavo velamut lifnei hahorban shel bet hamikdash hashenit. And I'm told now by the rabbis, that's not about the Messiah. That's about some obscure figure named Yotam. Did Yotam usher in righteousness? Did Yotam anoint the most holy place? Why would there be a prophecy about Yotam? Most Jews never heard of him. There's another Yotam in the book of Judges, but that's not him. Oh, but Rabbi so-and-so said this. Yeah, you can say that. But let's look at what the first rabbis said who looked at this. Yalkut, volume 2. If you look at page 79 Dalet of the Nazir edition, or look at Midrash Bereshit on page 243 of the Warsaw edition, the Messiah would come and exit in 33 CE. The Messiah had to come and die before the second temple would be destroyed. The ancient rabbis don't agree with you. The ancient rabbis don't agree with your rabbis. Which rabbi do you want to believe? That's the question. I emailed myself something and I printed it off today. I always like hearing from Brother Jacob. For 40 years, 70 CE, take away 40, circa 30 CE. From the time of Yeshua to the destruction of the temple, according to Judaism, the people's sins were never forgiven. The scarlet thread cut from the sash of the Se'er Ezazel never turned white again. In the Menaot, the tractate, by the morning the oil in the lamps had burned out, the priests had come in and cleansed out the lamps, removing the wicks, putting in new wicks and pouring oil into them, ready for the kindling in the evening. The western lamp, however, although it had no more oil in it than the other lamps, miraculously continued to burn the entire day long. So that lamps were kindled in the evening, they were kindled for this one. The western lamp itself was then extinguished and cleaned out, and a fresh wick poured in it. Oil poured in it and then relit thus. The lamp provided the fire for lighting the other lamps, and yet was last to be cleaned out. The miracle testified to the divine presence in Israel. God had to come to Israel when that happened before 70 A.D. But let's continue. According to Sanhedrin 97b, the ancient rabbis, the ancient ones, knew the Messiah had to come already. For the Sanhedrin wept, Oy vavoy lanu, woe to us, for the temple's destroyed and Messiah has not come. Either God lied, or Messiah did come and you didn't recognize him. He's for the goys. Read Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah chapter 11. The Amim will resort to the Shoresh Ishai. The nations will come to the root of Jesse. The Messiah was to cause the Gentile nations to believe in the Jewish God. Of course the Gentiles believe in the Jewish God because of him. That's your interpretation. No, it's what Rambam said. Maimonides admitted that Christianity came, that the Gentiles would worship the true God. Which rabbi do you want to believe? Quite a thing. After man fell, the letter Vav was removed from the Hebrew word for generation, dor, because Vav corresponds alphanumerically to the Hebrew number 6, and the rabbis calculated that the fallen human race lost 6 things because of the sin of Adam. But the Vav is reintroduced in the book of Ruth, because the Messiah would be a descendant of Ruth, a Gentile woman married to a Jewish man who would restore those 6 things. The Megillah Ruth is read at Hag Shavuot to this day. And we read that there would be a Goel from Bethlehem, a Redeemer who would restore the Jewish people. Mikah Hanavi, Micah chapter 5, Perek Hey, picks up on this. Verse 2, but as for you, Bethlehem Ephratah, too little to be among the clans of Judah. For you one would go forth for me to be ruler in Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity. In Hebrew, Mikedem Mi'olam. The Messiah would be pre-existent. Oh, the Messiah is not pre-existent. That's what you Christians say. Well, so does the founder of the Hasidic movement. Baal Shem Tov was doing Jewish astral projections, and he said he went to heaven and he saw the Messiah studying Torah. And he asked the Messiah, when are you going to come? And he said, when every Jew can do what you do, astral projections. That's what they believe. When you see them walking around here in Golders Green, twirling their peyot and going like davening, they're trying to capture the zooms. They're trying to propagate study of Kabbalah. But it does confirm that the rabbis believe the Messiah was pre-existent. Well, you say it's about Jesus. No, the Targum Philistine says the Messiah shall go forth according to Micah chapter 5. Rabbi David Kimchi, find me a rabbi with the status of Kimchi in Judaism who's alive today. There aren't. Kimchi said it's about the Messiah. Which rabbi do you want to believe? Is your Rabbi Hershkovitz a greater sage than David Kimchi? It would be almost blasphemy in the Orthodox Jewish community to suggest the possibility. Which rabbi do you want to believe? But then we have Ishayahu Hanavi, Perek Nun Gimel. I agree, I love it. The fourth servant song of Isaiah. Oh, that's not about the Messiah. The common Jewish belief today among the Orthodox is it is not about the Messiah, it's about the vicarious suffering of the Jewish people. That's what the rabbis will tell you. No, that's what Rabbi Hershkovitz will tell you. The ancient sages had a very different view. You think it's a Christian interpretation? Try reading Sanhedrin 98 Bet. Try reading the Midrash on Shmuel. Just look at the Lemberg edition, page 45 Aleph. Read the Targum on the kingdom of the Mashiach. Read the Targum Yonatan. According to Rabbi Moses Al-Sheikh, all the original sages agreed it is about the Messiah. The Messiah suffers for the iniquities of others. And they that do not admit this thing will suffer themselves. Who said so? If you reject this one in Isaiah 53, you're going to suffer for your own sin? That's a Christian gospel. Yeah. Moses Al-Sheikh, was he a Christian? If you're in a yeshiva, you undoubtedly would have heard of Rabbi Farisel. But Rabbi Abraham Farisel says this bears a striking resemblance to Jesus of Nazareth. A Christian distortion? In the Akedah, God banned human sacrifice. God banned human sacrifice to other gods. That's a Christian concept of an innocent man dying for the sin of others. This is about the Jewish people. You've got two problems, Rabbi Hershkovitz, and those who go to his shul. The first problem is that same Isaiah said the Jewish people have sin upon sin. They're not an innocent victim of the atonement. But there's another problem. If it's the Jewish people suffering vicariously for the sins of the Gentile nations, Hashem does believe in Jewish sacrifice. Judaism teaches it. Which rabbi do you want to believe? Rashi said this in the Middle Ages. Not until the Middle Ages, not until Rashi, did Jews begin to teach this. In fact, in the original Machzor for the Yom Kippur, for the Day of Atonement, Rabbi Avraham Farisel refers back to the Machzor. And in the Machzor of Eliezer HaKalir, they used to read Isaiah 53 in the synagogue on Yom Kippur, knowing it was about the Messiah. Who has believed our report? To whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? He grew up before him like a tender root Out of parched ground, he had no stately form or comeliness that we should look upon him, nor appearance that we should be attracted to him. He was despised and rejected, forsaken of men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Like one from whom men would hide their face, he was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely our griefs he himself bore, our sorrows he carried. Yet we ourselves esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. He was pierced through for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The chastening of our well-being fell upon him. By his scourging we are healed. Kulanu kansatayenu, all we like sheep have gone astray. Each has turned to his own way. But the Lord has caused the iniquity of us all to fall upon him. If they all turned away and went their own way against Hashem, how could they atone for their own sin? Oh, that's a Christian fabrication. That's an invention of Messianic Jews. Yeah. Did Messianic Jews write Sanhedrin 98 Bet? Did Messianic Jews write the Midrash on Shmuel? Or the Targum of the Messiah, the Targum Yonatan? Was Avraham Farisel a Messianic Jew? Was Moses al-Sheikh a Messianic Jew? No. These were your sages. Which rabbi do you want to believe? Hershkovitz or Moses al-Sheikh? Let's continue. But even Rashi, even the rabbi who said this is not about the Messiah, centuries and centuries later, had something else to say concerning Zechariah. Zechariah Hanavi, Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, I will pour out on the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Bet David, the spirit of grace and supplication. They'll look upon me who they have pierced and mourn for him as one mourns for an only son and weep bitterly over him like the bitter weeping over the firstborn. Rabbi Moshe Kazak said it's about the Messiah. Once again, Rabbi Moshe al-Sheikh said it's about the Messiah. In Sukkah 52:18, the Messiah shall suffer, the son of Joseph shall be slain. But there's another rabbi who said this is about the Messiah. Rashi said the Messiah would be pierced. Which rabbi do you want to believe? God gave the Torah forever. That is true. Too bad you can't keep it, because since 70 AD there hasn't been anybody can keep it. Why do you have a rabbi? Because you no longer have a Kohen HaGadol. Why do you have a synagogue? Because you no longer have a Bet Mikdash. You got a choice. Invent another religion, or accept that the Messiah has come to give a new covenant that does not replace, but that fulfills the Torah. He says, I will make a new covenant. I will make a new covenant, according to Jeremiah 31, with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers. Well, that's what you say. I was quoting from the Midrash on Psalm 7 in the Warsaw edition, page 5 Aleph. Once again, which rabbi do you want to believe? Then they go to another kind of argumentation. These silly contradictions in the New Testament. Look at the mistakes. You can't expect us to believe these Gospels. Just compare them. They contradict themselves. Arguments they borrowed from liberal higher critics. Of course, what they ignore to tell you is those same liberal higher critics say the same thing about the Tanakh. How do you account for these discrepancies between the genealogy of your Jesus in Luke and the genealogy of your Jesus in Matthew? Easy. The same way I account for the discrepancies, the apparent discrepancies, between the genealogies in Genesis and the genealogies in Chronicles. Matthew was a Jew. Ezra was a Jew. They only included the ancestors who were relative to the theological point they were trying to make. Matthew was trying to show Yeshua as a descendant of David, the royal line. He only includes the ancestors significant to illustrate that fact. When you read the early rabbinic polemics against belief in Jesus, it's interesting that the ancient sages never questioned his messiahship on the basis of his genealogy. But look how it differs from Luke. Well, it's quite a thing. How do you explain it? I don't have to. The rabbis explained it for me. Sanhedrin 29b. Miriam bat Heli. Luke's genealogy is through Miriam, Mary. Matthew's genealogy is a Levirate line through Joseph, circumventing Jeconiah. I don't have to explain it. The ancient sages explained it for me. Which rabbi do you want to believe? Sanhedrin 29c. You got a problem. You got a big problem. Is it going to be Rabbi Arkush from Lubavitch who refused to debate me? Or is it going to be Moshe Al-Sheikh? Is it going to be David Kimchi? Is it going to be Avraham Farisel? Is it even going to be Maimonides? Which rabbi do you want to believe? Well, I'll tell you the rabbi I believe. There's only one rabbi who fulfilled all of these predictions. His name is Rabbi Yeshua Bar Yosef Minetzeret. He's my rabbi. And my rabbi is better than your rabbi, because my rabbi is the Messiah of Israel. Who else died before the second temple would be destroyed and made the Gentile nations believe in your God? Everywhere in the world I go, all over this planet, it's the same thing. Argentina, Judíos, Jews. Russia, Ivri, Jews. Greece, Judei, Jews. Everybody hates them. Nobody's ever wanted them around. In 1290, they were kicked out of England. So Edward I could take their money. He forced them to become moneylenders, taxed them to their eyeballs, and then kicked them out when he got the cash. We hate you, Jew. We don't want you in our country. We don't want you in France. We don't want you in England. We don't want you in Germany. And above all, we don't want you in your own country. But we worship your God. But we believe your scriptures. But we call on the name of your Jesus. It doesn't make sense unless he was who the scriptures say he was. That makes sense. Why would you believe in the God of a nation and the people you hate unless he was the real one? Not that those people are real Christians, they're not. You cannot be a real Christian and hate anybody, especially not God's own chosen people. Yes, my Jewish friends, he chose you. But you are making the biggest mistake of your life if you don't choose him. Who can Meshichenu? Hu HaMashiach HaNachon. It's like this. You can always find another rabbi who will give another opinion. You can always find a reason not to believe. You can find a reason to believe or not believe anything in the Talmud. You can always. You can always engage in pilpul. It's not a problem. You can find a reason not to believe. But once you do, you're arguing with your own sages. You cannot say Christians distorted these predictions in the Tanakh. Not when your own sages say the Christians are right. It's about the Messiah. That's the problem. That's your problem, my Orthodox friend. Yes, I'm a Christian. And I'm a Christian who supports Israel and the Jewish people, who despises anti-Semitism. That is true. But let me tell you about the worst form of anti-Semitism there is. I would be an anti-Semite worse than Hitler if I knew the truth about your Messiah as the way of salvation and didn't tell you. Well, I am telling you. Hu Meshichenu. Hu HaMashiach HaNachon. Hu Mamash. Haderek HaAmet HaHaim. This is it, my friends. Once more, I will ask you the question. Which rabbi do you want to believe? Yitzhak und Adonai Yevrechem. God bless.